Hello and welcome back to NCSY Pulse. As always, we are powered by NCSY Alumni. Please remember to follow us, to rate and review us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at NCSY Pulse. And if you're interested in being featured in an upcoming episode, or you know somebody who might be, please shoot us a message on Instagram and maybe you'll be on a future show. I am very excited today to have the authors of the book Chutzpah Girls. I have Tami Schlossberg Pruver and Julie Siverstein from Israel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, John. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And I understand you just came back from Israel yourself.
I did, yes. Just got back from a family trip to Israel. It was phenomenal. And we were joking about before, the black bags under my eyes are fresh from the trip, still catching up on the jet lag. Actually, it was really funny. A friend of mine from NCSY, a colleague, shout out to my friend Denise from West Coast NCSY, suggested that to eliminate jet lag, all you have to do is walk outside in your bare feet and stare right off to the side of the sun. Don't stare directly at the sun, but stare off to the side. So I haven't tried this yet, mostly because it's freezing in New York right now. And so walking outside in my bare feet does not seem like such an exciting idea, but who knows? Maybe we have the cure for jet lag. But the trip was great. It's exciting to see both of you. So Chutzpah Girls, 100 Tales of Daring Jewish Women. Give me some backstory. This is so exciting. Where did you guys come up with this?
Well, for me, I think it started, I grew up in Europe. I grew up in Belgium. I'm originally from Italy, grew up in Belgium, and I moved to Israel when I was 18. On my own, and I grew up, as many of us, with Holocaust survivor grandparents, with stories of strength and resilience in my family, and specifically from the women. I was fortunate to know two of my great grandmothers. One of them was a single mom in Seattle. She had been widowed at a young age, and she really, she could have been crushed by her reality, but instead she faced the moment with so much strength, with so much resilience. She was one of the first women to set up the first Jewish woman to set up a business in Seattle, one of the first women to obtain a driver's license, and all of her earnings she invested in making sure that her children would have a very strong Jewish education. And at the same time, my other great-grandmother was in Europe. She was fleeing the Nazis in Belgium with her young family, and she arrived in Switzerland, and her husband was not allowed to join them. And, she could have been crippled by fear, and instead she spent every single day for 2 years campaigning for her husband to be allowed to join the family, and eventually she succeeded. And so I grew up with these stories of heroines in my family, and at the same time, those weren't the stories that were being reflected in my Jewish education, in a modern Orthodox institution, in youth movements, and I think even more so when I became a mom. I think mainstream literature had evolved, and there were stories of remarkable women, but the stories of Jewish women were missing. And I had a daughter at the time, and I really wanted to connect with her over the stories of heroines in our own heritage, over the values that are important to us. And so I started researching, and it was remarkable, the stories that we came across. Of course, some more iconic, well-known women that we've all heard of, but so many that we have never heard of and who have really made remarkable contributions to the world. And so that is, I think, for me, what sparked my curiosity and what made me want to make this book happen.
What a story! Like what a background. Julie, do you want to jump in terms of telling us some of your background?
Sure, John. I grew up in the United States, not quite as exotic as Tami, but I grew up in San Francisco, California, in a traditional Jewish home, went to Jewish day school, Jewish summer camps, and a strong Jewish education. I think what inspired this book for me were some of the experiences that I had when I became a mother myself. My older two children had their bar and bat mitzvahs just a few months apart. And when my son and daughter had their bar and bat mitzvahs, they both put in equal preparation. And when it came time for them to have their bar and bat mitzvahs, my son received Sifrei Kodesh. He received a Talmud set. He received Tanakh engraved beautifully with his name. He received a Machzor set. He received Sidurim. He received Tefillin. And a few months later, my daughter, after seemingly put in very similar effort, received jewelry and handbags. And,
Right.
this was what I'd consider to be a highly educated, modern Orthodox community that valued a strong secular and religious education for my children. And what appeared to be so on the surface, I think, was different when it came time for the gifts. The gifts are expressions of values. They're expressions of what are important to us. Of course, was that, they wanted the best, of course, for both of my children. And so initially the thought was to create a book that would help to rectify that bias, the historical bias, and even the bias that we are seeing even today in our communities. But over time, that mission evolved to be more than just that. And, October 7th happened and the world around us changed, the Jewish world and the world outside. And we realized that the book needed to evolve along with it. And it's taken on a new life as a result.
I'm sure it has. The world has changed after October 7th in so many ways. Why do you think this book is so important, especially post October 7th? Obviously, it was important before October 7th, but the world has changed, as you said. What is it specifically about this book that is so much more important now?
Well, maybe I'll address the pre-October 7th and Julie can address the post-October 7th. We were at a conference recently and we had a very powerful moment. There was a room full of people and we asked them, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Albert Einstein. And of course, everybody raised their hand. And then we said, well, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Emmy Noether. And not one person in the room had raised their hands. And Emmy Noether was a Jewish woman, a brilliant mathematician who was faced discrimination as a woman and as a Jew. She wasn't allowed to study in university. She wasn't allowed to teach. Yet somehow she was instrumental in developing Einstein's theory of relativity, which we all know changed the world, and nobody has ever heard of her. So that was just one example why we felt that, this book was really necessary. As Jews, we're always telling our story at every opportunity, at every holiday. It's something that we do. But so many of the stories that actually made a mark and changed the world weren't being told. And so I think for us, that was the reason why we felt this book would be so important. And as Julie mentioned, of course, after October 7th, that took on a whole different scope.
Look, there's so many different ways that we could, speak about October 7th. One thing that's happened within the Jewish world is we've seen really big intergenerational divides. The way that certain generations, certain communities are thinking about Israel has created a lot of rifts within the Jewish world, and we want the issue of Jewish women and Jewish women's visibility, Jewish empowerment to be an issue that unites the Jewish world rather than dividing the Jewish world. So we see this book really as a bridge in these very difficult times where there is so much division. It's a book that granddaughters and grandmothers or grandchildren and grandmothers can share together to have conversations about Jewish history, Jewish values, Jewish traditions, to bridge the divisions that we've seen. We're also experiencing so much hatred and anti-Semitism from the outside, and we need to each be able to remember the stories of courage, of chutzpah within our own families, within our own communities, and certainly within our own lives, to be able to claim that trait of chutzpah and to be able to say, this is my chutzpah story. This is the moment where I'm going to stand up in these challenging times. What we see throughout the book is that these were not women that were groomed for leadership. They were not groomed to create the accomplishments and achievements that they ultimately did, but they faced moments of challenge, they faced moments of difficulty, and they met those moments with their courage, with their chutzpah, with their audacity, with their creativity, and they went on to transform their fields, their communities, and in many cases, the larger world. And this is a moment that's demanding all of us to do the same. This is a generation that will have to be accidental leaders and accidental activists, even if they thought they could, rest on their laurels and just be participants and disappear into the crowd. This is a community that's going to ask every one of us to be leaders, to stand up, to step up in these challenging moments. And NCSY is exactly the group that's going to need to do this the most. It's our alumni and it's our current NCSYers who are going to go out and they're going to lead the Jewish world and they're going to lead the secular world, and they're going to have to be a bridge between the two.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and that's really an eloquent way to describe it. And I want to hear where you got the idea of the title Chutzpah Girls and where, what chutzpah really means to the two of you. But Julie, you mentioned to me, before we started recording that you're actually an NCSY parent. Can you tell us a little bit about what your family's NCSY experience has been so far?
Sure. I mean, so that son that I mentioned in the earlier story, who had his bar mitzvah, he was 13, and now suddenly he's 17. We live in Jerusalem. We live in Israel. My son goes to an all-boys school called Himmelfarb in Jerusalem, and he is an NCSYer, so he participates in NCSY programs here in Jerusalem. And he's very dedicated to going to every regional NCSY Shabbaton. In fact, when I mentioned that I was going to be on this podcast just a few minutes before we started speaking, he said, "Oh my goodness, you reminded me that I have to sign up for the next NCSY Shabbaton." He does not want to miss an opportunity to connect with his friends around the region, Beit Shemesh, Ra'anana, Modi'in, Tel Aviv, and he's very dedicated to what NCSY represents. And a few summers ago, we asked him, what would you like to do this summer? And he said, "I think I'd really like to travel, but I want to be able to travel, keep kosher, and to keep Shabbat." And when we started to do some research, we realized that there was really only one option available. It was an NCSY summer program. And so we started researching the different options, and we encountered the NCSY passport program. And so he had the opportunity to travel to Costa Rica and to Panama with NCSY, which was really incredible because it was a chance for us to say, Matan, go out and see and experience the world, have adventures, and still stay true to your values and who you are as a modern Orthodox Jew.
Really, nothing beats NCSY summer program, so I'm so excited to hear that you guys have been involved with it and that he had such a great experience and that the experience is continuing in Israel. It's exciting to hear, and hey, with regional coming up, I'm glad that we were able to remind him so he didn't lose out on his spot. That's important.
John, NCSY has been really a core part of our Israel experience, and for those who are living outside of Israel, it's important for them to appreciate how challenging it can be for a native English speaker to adjust to life in Israel. Of course, now he speaks Hebrew and now he has Israeli friends in school and his activities outside of school, but he's still kind of an American in his mentality, and some of his very closest friends now are through NCSY. It's actually been a English-speaking NCSY program that's allowed him to feel so integrated into life here, and has given him this whole sort of second social life outside of his traditional schooling.
It's incredible. We love to hear it. Love to hear about NCSY Israel and the incredible things they're doing. And I'm so happy that he's found a group, he's found a support system, and just like you said, it might be an English-speaking group, even though you're in Israel, but it is an incredible opportunity there, and I'm so glad that you guys were able to find that connection. That's really, it's really inspiring for us to hear on this end about all the incredible things that NCSY Israel is accomplishing. I want to go back because you mentioned before, and before we delved into the NCSY side of things, but the title of the book is Chutzpah Girls, and you both kind of have mentioned the idea of chutzpah being a necessary component to leadership now. What does chutzpah mean to the two of you, and why was that the title that you decided to run with for the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, John, as I mentioned before, many of these women in the book have had to face discrimination, not only as women, but also as Jews. So they were really facing double discrimination. At some point when we were writing the book, I even said to Julie, you know, this was before October 7th, I said, maybe let's tone down the anti-Semitism side, because it's a lot of discrimination to have to face, and it's kind of heavy for a book. And then, of course, October 7th happened, and we decided to leave it unedited. But we were trying to think about what that superpower was that these women had, that allowed them to not only survive, but also thrive, having faced so much discrimination. And we came across this beautiful quote from the Talmud. It's in the Yerushalmi, actually, and it says, Rabbi Zira said, "Come and see what chutzpah the land of Israel has, that it produces fruit in barren land." And to us, that really summed it up so beautifully. Also, that audacity to thrive and blossom in the harshest of conditions, which women have always had to do as women and as Jews, but also the fact of being able to show up in a place where nobody's expecting to see you. And so, you know, to us, that really summed it up really beautifully. And then, of course, we have another definition that we have in the book that we created ourselves that is a bit broader. And I think the beauty of it is just that there isn't one type of chutzpah. And as Julie mentioned before, you know, this is a moment that requires each of us to step up in the ways that we can. And if you flip through the book, you'll notice it's extremely diverse. The women come from over 30 countries around the world. They have different ethnic backgrounds, different fields of contribution. There isn't just one type of chutzpah, and we all have leadership qualities that we can leverage and that can help us make a difference. Some of the women in the book were even stay-at-home moms, and they got a Nobel Prize, and they were fighting anti-Semitism. So, you know, it's really not about the background that you have or how groomed you were to lead, but it's really about connecting to your inner chutzpah, your inner power, and trying to leverage and channel that into making a positive difference.
As I mentioned before, as the father of 4 girls, and I am often called by my friends a girl dad, and I am proud of it. And I love the value here of being able to take something like your book, to show it to my girls. We recently made 2 bat mitzvahs, and we have a lot of friends making bar mitzvahs. And it was such an interesting parallel where, you know, as you said, the bar mitzvah boys get certain gifts and did certain things. And there seemed to be almost a recipe. Like, here's what happens for a bar mitzvah, and here are the gifts you give for a bar mitzvah. And there's a formula for it. And then for the bat mitzvah, it was a little bit more challenging. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I wonder, clearly you had a mission, both of you, walking into writing this book, and you had your own takes, your own philosophies, your own histories, your own stories and experiences that fed the book. Did anything change? You know, oftentimes you hear from authors that they set out to write a book and they sort of had one idea. And as they did their research and as they embraced the experience of writing and of researching, of interviewing and speaking to people, sometimes they learn something new that they didn't even expect. And that becomes really part of the soul and the essence of the book. Was there anything that maybe you didn't start this experience with that now on the tail end you can look back and say, wow, this really changed our view of leadership. This really changed our expectations of how the book would be received. Was there anything different from the beginning of the process to the end of the process?
Well, I would say one thing that maybe was different, and I think is very much related to you, John, as a girl dad, is the importance of chutzpah champs. That every single chutzpah girl needs chutzpah champs. They need many. They need the men, the fathers, their brothers. They need to be championed across the board. And so I hope that, you know, anyone who's listening and doesn't fall into the chutzpah girl category, doesn't immediately want to, you know, just sort of turn off or tune out. But it's really the chutzpah champs that we need more than ever. In terms of another shift, I think was the experience of going through this moment, this post-October 7th moment, with this book now in hand. I think that, many Jews now are feeling the sense of desperation and loneliness. They're feeling the hate from the outside world. They're feeling even a sense of abandonment from traditional allies and even from Jews within the Jewish world. We had a call with somebody today who said there's all the Jews out there that say, as a Jew, I disagree with it's all the as a Jews. So I think, it's such a challenging time for us all. And I think that the experience of researching and writing and now holding this book has really changed the way that Tami and I both walk through the world. I think that we have come to appreciate that it was really Jewish women throughout history that met dark moments, just like the one that we're facing today, not dissimilar from it in many, many ways. And found the courage, found the audacity, found the strength within to meet the challenge and to go on. And so I think that if you have a sense of history, your own family history, your own personal story, that you're going to walk through the world differently, to know that we've been here and we will overcome and we will see the light and we will be stronger for it.
I was taking a look through the lists of the different women who are listed in the book, and it really is impressive. And the range across not only the Jewish spectrum, but going so far back into our history, we have women from Tanakh, we have women from modern day, and everywhere in between. What went into the selection process? I'm so curious. What inspired you to choose who you chose? How did you guys compile this list?
It's an excellent question. I mean, the list is a lot longer, and that's, you mentioned before that you hope that there will be a second book, and we hope so too, a second, a third, perhaps a podcast, and many chapter series. So the list is endless, and especially this year, the stories keep flowing in. There are so many heroines who have just stood up this year in ways that are remarkable and unprecedented. So the stories keep flowing in, and we hope there will be more. But I think for this book, diversity was really important for us. We wanted everyone within the Jewish world to feel seen. We wanted the stories to be inclusive and not divisive, so that the book would be edgy, but that it would speak to everyone across the Jewish spectrum and make everyone feel seen and included. So that was important to us. And of course, we wanted it to be age appropriate as well. We wanted to make sure that this book could be read, as Julie said, in an intergenerational forum, so grandparents could read it with their grandchildren, and that the stories would speak to everyone. I think another important factor with our selection process was the fact that these are not women who happen to be born Jewish and have done something remarkable in the world, but they're really women who are driven by their Jewish values. And so the impact that they leave is profoundly Jewish in the way that they go about it. So that was something that was important for us as well as we went through it. And we try to be as diverse as possible to keep things interesting and colorful, and to expose both the Jewish world and beyond that to as many types of Jews as possible.
You mentioned the diversity, talking about characters from the Tanakh, like Yehudi was mentioned and Leah was mentioned, all the way up to today with Mayim Bialik and other women who are included in the list. Are there any specific ones that stand out? Maybe, I don't want to say a favorite. I'm sure, like your own children, we all say about our kids is that none of them are our favorites. And then the kids always respond, right? But really, I'm the favorite, right? Is there any that stand out to you as like, this one is maybe a favorite, or maybe it's not a favorite, but it's really relevant, super important in today's day and age, or somebody that you would want to highlight from the list of women that you have these stories about?
There's so many. It's really hard to choose. I will say, to me, one of the stories that really struck me was the story of Judy Feld-Carr. She's a Canadian musicologist who lives in Toronto, and after the Six-Day War, Jews in Syria were being discriminated against, treated very violently, and they weren't allowed to leave. And she had read an article about this in her local newspaper, and she just decided that something needed to be done. And so for 30 years, she ran a secret underground operation from the living room of her home, smuggling Jews out of Syria. She saved over 3,000 Jews. She even managed to smuggle out the Damascus Keter, which is a very ornate and special Tanakh, which now sits in the National Library in Israel. And throughout this entire process, she was also widowed at a young age. She was then a single mom for many years. So she had her own challenges, but she had this mission, and she never gave up. And I think this is a beautiful example of, leadership, where it just comes to prove that anyone can lead if you care enough, and if you decide that this is the moment that you were called to act, and you just don't look away when you're needed. And she did it, and she saved over 3,000 Jews. And I think for me it was very eye-opening, also having been raised in modern Orthodox institutions and having had a very strong focus on Holocaust education. I was less familiar with the discrimination of Mizrahi and Sephardi and Yemenite Jews throughout Jewish history, and so that was really eye-opening for me as well. Having gone through a pretty serious Jewish education, but not having been exposed to those stories. So I think that's one of the stories that really moved me.
A story that moved me is Gluckel of Hameln. I'm drawn to the story for a variety of reasons. One is because I'm also the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and refugees from Germany. She herself lived in Germany in the 1700s and is famous for being a Yiddish diarist. She was a mother of 11 children, and she found the time to record in a series of very detailed and beautifully written diaries what her life was like as a Jewish mother, as a woman, as a businesswoman during this time. And I think it's a wonderful story because it's a reminder to all of us, whether it's the young NCSYers who are listening, who would say, I can't do that because I've got basketball on Thursday and I've got debate on Wednesday, and all the mothers and fathers out there that are saying, well, between my children and keeping the house in order and work, I don't have time. I mean, she is someone who, with 11 children, she was also widowed at a quite a young age. She found the time to write and to tell her story. And I think this is what we all need to do. We need to remind ourselves that we're bigger than we think we are. There's hours in the day that we didn't think that we had. And to stretch ourselves in this moment that demands all of us to be bigger and louder and better than we are, to find the time and the strength within us to do more.
That's incredible. You say you need chutzpah champs, and I feel like I'm approaching the level of chutzpah champ in my house, but I'm always looking for ways, to help my children, my daughters, to embrace leadership and to achieve and to recognize that not only do they have a certain level of chutzpah, sometimes maybe a little too much chutzpah, but okay, we like the concept, and we'll let them grow with it. But that it's really critical for young Jewish women to spread their wings and to embrace this idea, to embrace chutzpah, to embrace the idea of taking a step forward. And like you said, we're all accidental leaders, and they are the next generation of great accidental leaders. And I think this book and these concepts and what the two of you are doing so critical in that development and in their development. What's next? This is such an achievement. You've already done so much in publishing the book and getting it out there. The accolades, well, let's start here. The accolades you've been getting, from what I've seen, have been amazing. What is it like for you? What does it feel like to be getting kudos and accolades and all of these people, sort of singing from the rooftops about how amazing this is? How has that been so far?
Well, I have to share with you one anecdote, which is that, on the day that we opened pre-sales for the book was the same day that there was a very large boycott of authors and publishing industry executives, 1,000 of them, against Jewish and Israeli books. And we opened pre-sales, and we sold out our entire first print run in 4 days. And I think This is so Jewish. It's so chutzpah, and it's so Jewish, because the way that Jews answer hate in this time is to say, we choose life, we buy books, we want to tell our story. We want to celebrate who we are. We want to take pride in our heritage. And, we've been so fortunate that a number of high-profile, loud and proud Jews, whether it's Lizzie Savetsky, Noah Tishby, Mayim Bialik, and others, have stepped forward, have volunteered to step forward to share the messages of our book, to celebrate Jewish women's visibility, Jewish pride, and empowerment in this time. We recently received news that we're going to be translated into other languages, which we're very excited about. So Hebrew next, and French, and hopefully soon thereafter Spanish, Italian, Russian, and German, which is kind of mind-boggling. But Chutzpah Girls are going worldwide, and I think this is core to what we want to achieve, which is to say that Chutzpah Girls are everywhere. It should be read in every language. And the Jewish world is so much more than Sephardi and Ashkenazi. We're Bukharian, we're Ethiopian, we're Yemenite, we're speaking many languages. We're all over the world with so many different stories. And so we're just delighted that the book's message will be spread far and wide. And we also have a number of other projects in the works. We're working with a screenwriter, a playwright, who's turning the book into a script, and will be performing it soon for Women's History Month in March.
Wow.
As a one-woman show. And we've also digitized all of the art in the book, and it's available for pop-up art exhibit in your community. So we encourage you to reach out to us and figure out how you can bring these stories and these portraits to your community as well.
Love it. Sounds amazing. I'm blown away that the book is being already translated into multiple languages, which I think begs the question. Chutzpah Girls 2, we alluded to it. Is that something that's in the works?
John, I think you asked about, what it's like for us having all these accolades and famous people endorsing the book. But I think for me, the most moving has been the flood of emails that we're getting by women and men telling us, you need to include her in my book, or my grandmother was a Chutzpah Girl. You need to hear this story, and in the fact that it's just making people look back into their own stories, their own families, their own heritage, and wanting to publish these stories. That was really the goal for us. So yes, we definitely hope there will be a Chutzpah Girls too. We definitely have enough stories to fill the book, so hopefully that's next, and we can't wait.
The true title for this book is not actually Chutzpah Girls. It's the incomplete list of daring Jewish women. We know that there are way more than 100. We have spreadsheets with hundreds and hundreds. We encourage people to write to us with more names. We want to keep telling stories of Jewish women, whether it's through a follow-up book or light chapter series or a podcast, and we welcome the partnerships of others. So please get in touch if you're interested in doing the same.
And if somebody does want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you?
So we have a website. It's chutzpahgirls.com. We've also opened a store of over 100 proudly Jewish products. It's chutzpahstore.com, and a portion of our proceeds is supporting women and children impacted by October 7th. So we're trying to draw on the attention that the book has received to do more good in the world and to help people to wear their Jewish pride while they're giving to tzedakah. And you can find our contact information on the website.
Okay, excellent. One last question before we wrap things up. You mentioned that the art of the book is available. You mentioned that it can be provided as pop-up art. What's the backstory of the art? I know that the art of the book is something that the two of you are very proud of. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Well, we didn't just want to write the stories. We wanted to bring them to life. We wanted to create a celebration. And so every story in the book is accompanied by an original portrait created by a Jewish female artist around the world. So it's really a book about Jewish women by Jewish women. We worked with 12 female Jewish artists. And it's very diverse, it's bold, it's vibrant. It just really feels like a party. We wanted to create an experience more than just beyond the stories. And so yes, the art is beautiful, and you can have it come to your communities as well in the form of an exhibition.
Okay. Tami, Julie, this has been really phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining, and we wish you lots of success with Chutzpah Girls and with all of the different projects you have coming up. Everybody, this has been NCSY Pulse, joined by the authors of Chutzpah Girls, Tami Schlossberg Pruver and Julie Siverstein. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.